Hey, it's one of those days where ideas kind of hit me with quick succession. I kind of tend to go through books or a bunch of media and think about some of the things, and then I don't know, for some reason, ideas come at a specific point in time, and this just happens to be one of those days. There was this one idea in particular I worked on. I took some time to document it. It's just kind of version 1.0, which is really kind of bare bones. It's like really raw, really fresh. But the idea kind of revolves around using something that occurs quite abundantly and naturally in the on terrestrial Earth. These are biological life forms called diatoms. I think that's how they're pronounced, Diatoms. And these are these kind of tiny, almost not exactly molecular, but like multicellular organisms which suck up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they turn it into oxygen. So these are like really tiny machines that perform the process of photosynthesis quite efficiently. And this is like really surprising to me, but 20 to 40% by some estimates of all the oxygen on Earth comes from these creatures called diatoms. So I realized this a couple of days ago, and we're kind of thinking about that, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty significant. You could use something like that on other planets, and I know I picked this up somewhere. I know this one scientist by the name of Craig Venter um, sequenced the human genome for a fraction of the price what the government said it. It's like I think that's one of Craig's most notable achievements. I'm not sure if he's the father of synthetic biology, but kind of genomics tying in with synthetic biology, um, like obviously his contribution is immense in that field. So what I was thinking was, what if we could synthetically produce diatoms uh, for other planets now that we have CRISPR, which is basically a gene editing um, technique. So we could, and it's very timely. I have my planetary resources T-shirt on today, so we're getting all these space-based ideas. But yeah, basically what I was thinking was, what if we can use CRISPR to basically create these kind of organisms for other planets, and then kind of release them in control settings. So I started doing a little bit of research, and something called the atmospheric pressure. Um, no, actually, hold on. There is a specific term for this. Whoops. Atmospheric escape, not pressure. So it's the loss of planetary atmospheric gases to outer space, and there's basically different kind of atmospheric escape that exists on different planets. And it's kind of surprising. This is another idea I had. I'm not going to talk about it in this video, but apparently Earth and Venus are kind of sitting in this perfect zone. I'm not going to call it Goldilocks zone, but they kind of sit in this perfect zone when it comes to the retention of the atmosphere in terms of the escape velocity. Um, Whereas Mars, Ganymede, Titan, some of these other planetary bodies sit one layer down, and Jupiter or Saturn, they're like completely in another zone. But anyway, so the atmospheric escape is interesting, and I kind of started thinking, okay, well, if we're going to colonize Mars, then it's not exactly sitting in that ideal zone. Where I'm getting with all this is, say, even if you kind of came up with some kind of construct in order to create an atmosphere around a planetary body like Mars, then we'd have to kind of do the math in order to be able to figure out how that atmosphere could be retained. And in the absence of kind of doing those kind of exercises, it's kind of like it's. I think that's going to be one of the key prerequisites, a precursor to whatever kind of activities follow through, specifically when it comes to terraforming Mars or another planetary body like Mars with a specific atmospheric escape. So then I started thinking, well, Martian atmospheric escape is quite high, which means that whatever kind of gases have been produced on Mars or will be produced will be lost out to the outer solar system or to space because of that very fact. And obviously, all of this has to do with gravity. So the thing that holds the atmosphere together is gravity. And if you have a low gravitational pull on any given planet, then basically the atmosphere kind of flows out. That's the way I kind of understand it based on the very limited amount of research I've been able to do. So logical next step would be to create some kind of a structure on Mars or any other body at that, and to kind of have controlled environments whereby basically the whole the climate could be controlled in a closed system. So now we kind of come to the idea. So I kind of thought about like how would this work, and I in my mind I kind of started thinking about three things. I was thinking of diatoms already. I've been reading up on nanotechnology, just kind of getting into it. I've had an interest in it for a couple of years, but never really built a base. And the third thing is something called geodesic. I think that's how you say it. Domes, in order to be able to kind of create those kind of structures. So really, the geodesic dome, as Buckminster Fuller or Bucky envisioned it. So apparently these are structures that get stronger the bigger they become. It's kind of one of those facts that's contested, and I'm kind of directly checking in through Twitter with one of the authors that made this claim in one of the books they wrote. But everyone kind of knows that if you build, well, this is mathematically proven. Actually, not everyone knows that up to a certain size, Bucky structures, or sorry, geodesic domes are quite resilient, quite strong. So diatoms, nanotechnology, geodesic domes. Where am I going with this? So I started thinking, well, what would be the ideal way to make structures that are ideal for another habitat? And I thought, well, if you kind of went about designing this manually, it's going to take forever. Because not only are we talking about the structural stability, I'm a systems kind of guy, so I'm always thinking about the interaction of different systems with each other. And you have to kind of consider the complexities involved from almost like a fluid dynamics point of view. And it's difficult to kind of do that, if not impossible. Depends on the scope and complexity of the project. But to be able to kind of map out all the different intricacies of the various systems working with each other is quite a challenge. It can be quite a challenge. I don't think it's humanly possible. But so here's the fourth component to the idea. So genetic algorithms are really interesting. You can basically give the machine a set of preset coordinates or values and tell it to go solve a problem, and it would do it. So it's really quite fascinating if you just kind of go to YouTube and type genetic algorithm and kind of look at some of the stuff that comes up. It's quite remarkable what genetic algorithms are able to do. So in a recombinant fashion, I kind of thought about putting these four things together. And the idea I kind of came up with is a combination of, again, these four. So making use of diatoms, nanotechnology, and genetic algorithms in order to create structures like geodesic domes in a systems kind of an environment, so that you have a living, breathing kind of a habitat for flora and fauna. And I took some time to kind of draft the initial version of this idea, which I'll plug a link to this blog post right underneath this video. And there's just version 1. And the thing I kind of like about ideas is that they always have a merger with another idea, and you never know what's going to come out of it. But the way I kind of envision this is that we have a design phase, and then we have a pre-build phase where we kind of create a couple of different structures and learn from that experience, and then kind of go full on, start creating settlements on another planetary body. And I think most of the time is going to be spent, if not equal amount of time, is going to be spent on the design process. So just kind of working out all the different intricacies in terms of what kind of organisms are required, in terms of diatoms or any other microbiota that's required in order to be able to sustain future life forms. Even with our bodies right now, there's like in trillions and trillions of bacteria. I think there's more bacteria than there are actual cells within our bodies. There's like tens of trillions of cells. I think it's 18 trillion. But then I checked again, I think it was like 30 something trillion. I don't know which one is correct. Depends on the source. But there's like trillions and trillions of cells in our bodies, but there's more bacteria apparently. So the richness, the diversity of bacteria in our body is much more than the actual amount of cells. It's mind-boggling. So that's generally the way I understand. Like that's what my definition, I think, is microbiota, and we're going to need those kind of life forms adapted to other surfaces in order to be able to evolve differently on other planets. So it's kind of like just looking at it from a bunch of different angles. So when you create the construct or the systems, the constructs have to keep all of these things into consideration. And but the logic, the way I kind of see it is you have a main central kind of dome where a human / other sentient like animals, if you need it, like pets or something. I don't think we're going to be growing pets, or I don't think there's going to be livestock on other planets. We're just going to be using something like modern meadow and moo-free for those kind of things. But there will be pets, I'm pretty sure. So in order to be able, and obviously there are going to be plants. So to be able to kind of sustain those kind of life forms, you have one central dome somewhere in the middle, it could be anywhere. And then you have kind of like surrounding mini pods, if you want to call them, or mini domes, where you have a whole bunch of other operations going on, all the way from growing your food, plants, crops, oxygen generation, using like natural means, if that's how it's going to be done. I think we're probably going to be just creating machines for that purpose. But like in a future evolving case, like if you're creating like a completely self-sustainable pod, using a combination of technology and biology, and eventually kind of shifting it towards a mechanism where it becomes completely sustainable from the perspective of some kind of biological system in a like a loop, systems loop kind of format, keeping the life cycle going, then that's how I kind of look at it in my mind. Not any different from how things are done here on Earth. So that's the idea in a nutshell. I figured that was the design process. Then I didn't talk about the build process. So the build process, the way I was thinking was, there's a bunch of ways you could do that, but obviously most of the effort would be on the creation of the domes itself. So the way I kind of envisioned this, and you kind of, to keep things realistic, you have to look at the maturation of technology. So you have an objective, and in order to be able to get to that objective, you've got to look at which technologies exist on the horizon, which will mature by that time frame, or any gaps that exist, you can push them in order to be able to get to a certain stage. And from that point of view, nanotechnology seems to be, I kind of asked around on a bunch of different websites. Nanotechnology still appears to be 15 to 20 years out. Isn't like functional nanotechnology. Whether it's going to be functional enough in order to be able to power geodesic domes, the size that are going to be able to hold a couple hundred people, that remains to be seen. There's like a bunch of other sub problems that you have to go solve in order to be able to make nanotechnology functional. Because nanotechnology is kind of tied in with AI, and scalable nanotechnology is not just dependent upon that. I think it's also dependent upon things like the ability to be able to compute on a larger scale. So then you're looking at different forms of computing, which then kind of pushes things from a computer architecture point of view, or from a hardware point of view. So you're looking at obviously better processors, and like perhaps something beyond Moore's law, and you're also looking at a lot of different, a ton of memory. So you can appreciate how one kind of technology pushes another, and it's not to say it's only related to these things. Obviously, you have to consider a lot of other things. You need like energy systems, you need propulsion systems. We're making really good progress on that. I'm like super happy to see both Elon and Bezos. Just like it's like every week some really awesome news is coming out, and planetary resources as well. So yeah, that was like just kind of a quick kind of glimpse into the build process. But the shell of the idea in my mind is that you have, like, we send some kind of a probe, a very intelligently kind of designed probe. We land it, it's supposed to do one thing, and that is to use materials in situ, which meaning local materials from the actual surface, and it's somehow able to leverage it in order to be able to first create a shell, and then a top, like a covering on top of that shell, and then it just kind of goes about and repeats the pattern, almost like a fractal, till one dome emerges, and then the other domes, and it just connects all of them through a series of channels, if you may call it. And then we can either, when it comes to the machinery, we can either print the circuitry for the machinery right there. The shell can be made out of local materials. And that's really all you need in order to be able to get going. We don't have to ship like mounds and mounds of ore or steel or anything like that in order to be able to colonize other planets. But specific to the domes, so once the shell has a base, then you coat it with a layer of silica, or turn sand into glass, like using something like solar center. Or you could just have, this is like a bit far out, but you could have the diatoms kind of build layer upon layer of transparent material, because it's like really silica. Once they die, it just leaves a trail of silica, specific kinds of diatoms. And then it kind of has a cover of a transparent material through which sunlight passes through, but not air, because you want to retain that oxygen in there, right? Mars, again, that does not have the ability to be able to retain the atmosphere. Not for now, at least. So that was like the idea in a nutshell. It's also kind of looked at some of the other technologies, what NASA is doing with their MOXIE project. It's really fascinating. They've got this machine that can strip out O2 from CO2. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, who would have thought we'd be able to do something like that? So there's a probe thing being sent in 2020, so like 4 years out, that's going to be using the MOXIE device. Just kind of taking a look at the blog post, and that's like really it. The other two ideas I had was it's even this. The other two ideas are really out there, but they're super exciting. I'm just gonna document that in another video. Thanks.